I'm Lisa Harrison, and today is Monday, the 21st of May 2012. And today I'm joined once again by David Yurth, and for the first time, Trevour Osborne, and also by a dear friend of mine, David O'Brien. So I'd like to welcome you all to today's rather deep discussion.
Happy to be here.
Now, the reason I've got the three of you here is because you're all visionaries, but more importantly, you also all have very practical skills. And I don't need to tell anybody watching this that we are in the midst of a paradigm shift. You know, if they're watching this, they're well aware of it. I don't have to convince the audience of that. But one of the things that I've noticed about this shift, particularly in the last 12 months, is what people seem to be waking up to is that the very systems of our culture, whether it's government, financial, the so-called healthcare system, resources, technology, they're all built from the ground up on lies and fraud and corruption. And I think we're realizing that we cannot just fill the gaps in, cover it in a nice coat of paint, and hope that they will take us from where we are now to where we want to be. I think we've come to the conclusion that that's just not going to work. We have to dismantle these structures, excuse me, and restart from scratch. But when you look at where we are and where we want to be, and I do believe most of us have a vision, it seems insurmountable almost. And I think that we're probably also in agreement that we can't tackle this problem with the same consciousness that created it, as I know that we've all probably said at one point or another. What needs to take place first is this shift in consciousness. And it can be argued that that's happening right now anyway. But if I was to, say, psychoanalyze the collective consciousness as if it were an individual, what it feels like to me is the consciousness of an abused child who has a victim mentality and is just in those initial stages of realizing that mum and dad are psychopaths and that everything they ever told me was a lie. And I now have to kind of go in there and dismantle myself and figure out who and what I really am. Excuse me. Because when you look at what we've done, we've allowed, several thousand psychopaths to set themselves up as these parental figures and control the lives of 7 billion people. And we refer to them as the elite. We've elevated them in our consciousness. As a result, it gives us a sense of helplessness. And we now have to, again, as I said, start from scratch and figuring out who we are, where we want to go, and practical ideas of how to get there. And I guess that's my intention with today, is to kind of inject some concepts, some ideas, some practical solutions into that collective as it's going through these initial stages of awakening, to ignite the imagination and to ignite the desire that seems to be starting to well up within us collectively. Does all of that make sense?
Absolutely. It does to me. I'm on the same page as you are, and my focus is more about creating a new system rather than trying to fight the old system. So I'd be very happy to talk about that side of things if that's what you'd like me to do.
It does seem like what we are doing far too much is focusing on the current paradigm and focusing on fighting the current paradigm rather than looking ahead and putting our energies towards the one that we want to bring in. And maybe it's because we just don't know where to look. We don't know what to create or the first steps in creating it. And hopefully this discussion will start, getting that conversation going. Not that it's not already happening in pockets all over the place, but at least we're doing our bit as well. David, you and I have spoken before, and people were very, very responsive to you. I must say, they did love you. And you have a lovely way of expressing the shifts in consciousness also that need to take place in order to embrace new paradigms in technology and what that actually means collectively and individually. So, do you want to start by a response to what I've said so far?
Sure, be happy to. First of all, let me just say I'm really pleased to be invited to participate in this conversation, because as far as I'm concerned, it's the only conversation that matters. A couple of things that drive my thinking about these issues. From the 100,000 foot level, it seems to me, and I think this is something we need to kind of kick this can around a little bit to make sure we're on the same page. But it seems to me there are a couple of things that are true about how we got to be in this mess in the first place. We've seen throughout history evidence that technology does change behavior. It doesn't change human nature, but it changes our behavior. I mean, all you have to do is look at what's happening with the Arab Spring and Twitter, get an idea about how powerful technology is in the context of human interaction. Having said that, I'm also convinced that in the absence of some really focused, spectacular kinds of changes, human nature doesn't change. I mean, over time, we've seen evidence of all kinds of attempts in the human community to provide people with an opportunity to participate in community in a way that changes their nature. And with very rare exception, those efforts have not been successful or very long-lived. And I think there's a fundamental reason for that. I think it's true that you have to provide people with an opportunity to get off the merry-go-round. I mean, if you don't have an opportunity to get off and get a new ticket, then you're just moving the deck chairs around waiting for it to go under. But having created an entity, Trevor's done some wonderful work over the years designing opportunities in a community setting for people to opt out and go to a new place where there's an opportunity to live in harmony without conflict in a way that's not found on the planet now. And we agree that creating a new opportunity is an essential ingredient. Where you do it, how you do it, with whom you do it, how you frame it, how you define and create and propagate the culture are the next set of variables that you have to talk about. I have a specific example in mind when I make that comment. In the early 60s, in the United States, a guy named Maharishi Mahesh Yogi brought some of his transcendental meditation followers to Oregon and created quite a stir. And in the 40 years that followed, Maharishi and his transcendental meditation movement really exerted a profound effect in some really important ways on the planet. And they demonstrated, for example, that when professionally trained meditators gather together in sufficient numbers and get on the same wavelength at the same time, they can literally exert an effect that alters human attitudes and behaviors. This is referred to as the Maharishi effect. And it is clearly and impeccably documented in a dozen different locales over the last 20 years. Well, it seems to me that to tell us something about what is possible in the context of the human experience. But there are problems with that. One of the problems with the Maharishi method is that Maharishi fell prey to precisely the same sense of exemption and immunity that we have seen happen with all the other really superb facilitators of new experiential technologies in the last 150 years. So, the issue is a critical one. If you're going to create an opportunity for people to change the way they behave with respect to each other by literally helping them transition from one way of being to another, there needs to be a very clear consensus and a really very specifically applied set of protocols to make sure that the culture you create fits within certain fairly narrowly defined boundaries. And that by itself is problematical, because in our day and age, that always becomes a cult. So we've got this two-edged sword, don't we? We've got everybody agreeing that some's got to give and looking for a place to get safe where we can live harmoniously together. And the only way that seems to be working in the human experience in the past is when everybody wears the same color clothes and has the same dentition,
Well, it's like the saying that communism looks perfect on paper, but you can't implement a perfect system with imperfect individuals. And so it's the individuals that need to change first.
Well, and that's the third point. For your benefit, Trevour and David, Lisa and I have been holding out on you. We've been having a conversation back and forth for the last few days about what it is that defines nature and the way we behave. And Trevour, you and I've talked about this before at some length. I mean, if you read the literature and you look at the research that's been done, what we discover is that the prime source of conflict in the human condition is a function of the story we tell about ourselves. And the story we make up about ourselves when we're very young is never true. And by and large, with rare exception, we spend our lives trying to prove the story's true and trying to adopt whatever masks we need to prevent anybody else from figuring it out. And the behaviors we do are asking for one or the other or both of those things all the time. Which what it means is that we don't know who we are in our true, personal, eternal magnificence. We don't know that experientially as a species. We don't.
But this is one of the another areas in which we've been lied to about what is human nature. So what if we would...
I don't think it's a lie. I think it's a function of how our biology works. I mean, all the research says that between the ages of 1 and 5 years old, when we learn to speak and understand language, there comes a moment in time when, participating in the enculturation process, we are forbidden to do what is authentic. So if you've ever been around a 3-year-old who's insisting on being authentic, you know what I mean. There are times when being authentic just doesn't work in culture. And because we're not capable of dealing in abstract conceptual ideas, we make it up that the reason we're being treated in that way, and that way meaning across the human experience how parents treat their children, we make it up that the reason we're treated that way is because there's something fundamentally wrong with us.
Yes.
And the research tells us that that notion cuts across all demographics, race and culture and religion and sex and economic status and so on. Everybody in their biology does that because we have to attribute meaning to our experience. But our way of doing that has to be literal because it can't be abstract. And by the time you're 5 or 6 years old, whatever that story is that you made up goes on autopilot. It's so deeply embedded in your psyche that it plays automatically for the rest of your life. So unless we can find in a new culture, in a new setting, where we can help each other reframe that tape, then we don't get to be our magnificent, authentic self. And that's what's going to create harmony, in my way of thinking.
Trevour, what do you say to that?
My view is, from the spiritual point of view, is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And my understanding is that as spiritual beings, we've chosen to explore the idea of limitations and being negative, which is the opposite of what we really are. It's the illusion of being the opposite. So being spiritual beings in that fashion, we are now at the end of this explorations at work and coming out of it, and now starting to realize who and what we really are, which are true magnificent beings, all-knowing, all-powerful. And bit by bit, we're starting to realize that. Now, as we come through this, of course, being in this physical universe that we are, the outer reality is that we created this limiting system to go along with that exploration. So when you look at all the systems we have today, every one of them is a limiting system which causes us to be limited. Look at the energy system, look at the transport system, look at all the other systems, the money system. They all limit us. So from my viewpoint, what excites me is to look at an alternative, creating an alternative system altogether. And I love Buckminster Fuller's quote, where he says, never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So rather than trying to change the system we have and fight with it, my idea is let's put together all the components that we already have into a new system and start forming from the ground up a new system. Now, as any researcher knows, in order to do this, you need to create prototypes. So you do this by bringing all the components together that we have, rather like a jigsaw puzzle, the foundational pieces, the corners, the edges, and so on. And from that, you can then build that foundation. You know, this sounds quite hypothetical, I know, but I've been probably close to 30 years working on this. And I've traveled the world, met many people around the world about 5 or 6 times, and created this network I call World Harmony. And with that, there are people, what I call key players. David Yurth being one of them. Probably yourself. I don't know if David O'Brien, so I couldn't say there, but there are leaders in this field that are already becoming so much aware of this and are willing to step out there and work towards that.
Well, before we move on to the models and the templates that are already out there, I just wanted to get David's thoughts on what's been said so far. David O'Brien, that is.
At least, look, I always look at the specific generations that have come through and their mandate. The generation that basically had to deal with the Second World War, and we know through information which we've accumulated over the years about how generations are actually preyed upon on a predatorial sense by this system, and this system that has been in place, regardless of what length you want to say the system has been going. But I'm talking post World War II. We know the system has amped up, basically turned the volume up, and mythically and spiritually understood that there were generations who were coming through who were the solution, and needed to prepare in the indoctrination of these generations to basically silence them, and these generations are now coming into their eldership status. There's a lot of men and women today who are falling into oldership, where they basically their accumulated knowledge and experience has been put by the wayside, and we haven't allowed this system, this Western civilization has not allowed those stories, and this is how tribal culture perpetuates its mythology. We haven't allowed these stories to be told, and more and more and more, we have huge corporations being created purely for the sense of indoctrinating these generations into subservience. And there are a group of people, a generation of people, a multi-generation of people, who have prepared for this moment for the last 30 to 40 to 50 years. There's no doubt about that. We've come into this world in the midst of a total deconstruction of the psyche, and we know that the first way the first stage of mind control is basically to deconstruct the psyche, to shatter the psyche into a million parts, and then have a model, have an agenda almost instantaneously prepared. And we saw that after 9/11, how instantaneously there was a rebuild of how the system wanted to interact with everybody, and in the loss of our civil rights. But this generation, or these generations, are still pressing on through all of that. Are still, even though oppression has been stepped up. So, and what I'm saying is that we're used to that. We're used to that inflicting, from a societal point, of these of this barbarism, this perpetual predatorial influence that we've almost binded by living in it and watching, and also, which is I think a really important part, is becoming the observer of it, and also allowing ourselves, through all of this deception and treachery which is going on, with the system, is to be true to the system that we were here to create. And I know with David and Trevour, we've all been on this 30 to 40 year journey with our experiences and with our intent, and that perpetuation and that continual reflection that we give society is integral to this moment in time, because the society needs reference points of generations of people who, on a collective level, have worked through the quagmire, who have almost satiated themselves with it, almost embellished in it, and it's not that like that saying, be in the world but not of it. We've almost become the system only to bind it into understanding it, and you have to understand it on a genetic level. You have to understand how it works on a genetic level, because that's the integral part of it, and that's the feedback you get. And with these technologies that we have come in to create, almost we send out this information that comes back to us, and we try to succinctly derive some sort of sanity out of this madness. And I think a lot of us have been very successful in that, even though there have been pinnacle points in our lives where we've been at that edge, and now society is at that edge, and we've been there. we've been there, 30 or 40 years ago. So this is just a reference point of a moment that we can identify with. But we know, and you were saying before about about what's happening now. Where do we go from here? It's because these people have moved through this and understood exactly where this was going on a subconscious level. I'm not talking about on a conscious level, but as with everything has to come up from the subconscious into the conscious to actually be dealt with. And this process has been going on until now, and something is happening now. Obviously, we know that this new paradigm shift you're talking about, that there is a call to action with a generation of people, and we know within tribal society that the eldership, people have to accept eldership. People have to accept that right with the pure intent that their motives and their assertions and their perceptions are coherent to the collective to the collective whole, to the collective consciousness.
So what this whole paradigm shift that we're going through it in
we're
spite
creating,
of ourselves, but
we're not going through it. We are creating it.
It feels like we're going through it in spite of ourselves. We're being carried along.
But that's not taking responsibility for it.
That's where I'm getting to. And now it's, rather than sort of being swept along by this wave, this cosmic wave that's happening, we need to start riding this wave and getting ahead of the wave.
Exactly.
But in part of that process, perhaps is the opportunity to reevaluate and really rethink what we believe is human nature. The times that I've been told that we need competition in order to drive progress. We need the goal of usually monetary gain in order to inspire ambition. These sort of things are supposed to be human nature. We only learn out of chaos and what's the saying, that necessity is the mother of invention, that we only strive to achieve anything out of sheer necessity, or there's another way of putting it, people either move towards pleasure or away from pain. There are two motivations, but the stronger one is to move away from pain. That's the biggest motivator. So maybe all of that is a part of getting in front of this wave, and that's what we have a chance to do, is to wipe the slate clean.
So how do you become proactive about it? Well, what do we want?
How do you become proactive?
About that very issue, in terms of deciding what direction to go and how to go there.
Well, I think what David is saying is also what I just said in that we've lived our lives based on the moving away from pain.
I disagree with that.
As being the instigator. And I think we have the opportunity now to move towards having being motivated by moving towards pleasure.
I don't think it's moving away from pain. I feel it's going through the pain of what the system is injecting into the collective consciousness, and it's going through it and to the other side, and to become the observer of it. And in creating that process, in going through that process, becoming the observer of it means that you can anticipate exactly where it's going, and have some sort of insight and understanding to how to move, how to be 10 steps ahead of it in your own individual life, but also when you inject your understanding of that into a collective situation, that the other like minds will also sort of switch onto that.
David, where do you disagree? What did you mean?
I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all.
Oh, sorry.
No, I don't disagree at all. The question I'm asking is that if we're in agreement that a key element for facilitating change is to know what you want in terms of the change. You need to know what you want before you can have a strategy to get there, right?
Mm.
So in the context of this conversation, what do we want?
Well, I feel that you get to a stage where you've exhausted, to the max everything that you don't want. You know intrinsically.
Yeah, the don't wants is a long list, and everybody knows it.
Yep. And you have to go through that list to get to what you want.
Well, but the list of do wants, of being specific and very clear in terms of the priorities of what you do want, is the shortest list of all. And there's no consensus about what that is. It seems to me that that's one of the challenges we have to rise to. Mm. What do we want? I mean, I know what.
How do we get, and even should we be trying to get 7 billion people to hold a collective vision? Is that even possible?
My take on this is that rather than trying to look at specifics of what we agree on, let's look at principles that we agree on. For example, cooperation. Now, we all agree that cooperation is something we would all desire. Now, it's a very fundamental principle.
It is fundamental, yes.
Would we like everybody to win rather than winning and losing, fighting and cooperate and having competition where once somebody loses every time somebody wins? Would we prefer to have a system which everybody wins, everybody benefits, the environment benefits, the planet benefits, things like this? So I've set out a series of principles and I put them on my website for people to look at and see, okay, is this what we want to do? Is this? And then it's a starting point. Let's look at all those things and perhaps add to them, maybe change them, maybe fine-tune them, whatever. That way we've got principles upon which every nation, every culture can agree or not. And I think you find that there are certain principles that everybody does agree to. And if we work towards those, then we've got the foundation of a very flexible culture that can embrace any form, provided it's within those principles. And that's what I'm looking at.
You know, it's just funny. I was just thinking that with the advent of Vietnam, it seemed that the one thing that everybody called for, the only thing that was really asked for in the world that we want was peace. That's all we want. We just want peace. But now that list of things that we want is getting longer and longer and longer in the world that we want to create. It's about so much more than just peace. You know, we're really capable of going beyond that vision and beyond the vision of just nation against nation at war with one another, and seeing we are starting to get down to the details. We're starting to see how we want this world to look on a personal, community, and national and global scale. We're starting to. It feels to me like we are anyway. We are starting to define and clear that vision, and we're getting quite precise with some things. You know, when we talk about energy and what free energy will do.
Mm. Well, let's have a look at what the fundamental and I don't like to use the word enemy, but the immovable object. We are the irresistible force. What is the immovable object? The immovable object is a system created by another system, which basically perpetuates lack of empathy and compassion within a bloodline, and almost like creates what do they call it? A production line of humans, of
biological resources.
Well, no, I'm talking about the men who are controlling this planet, right? These men are a part of a system that manufactures leaders. It doesn't create leaders from their individual experience, like what's happening with us today, right? Our individual experience defines who we are, and we inject that into the collective imagination or the collective consciousness, and we ride with it, right? And we feel our way through, and we inject ourselves in it when we feel that we are either invited or that necessity. But this system that we're fighting is a production line. It's like going into a car factory and seeing the cars go through, and we know that through the systems of how they inject into their resources, i.e., their media and their other weapons they use against us.
So instead of a car factory, what it's producing is politicians and CEOs, and is that what you're saying? We've got this system that just manufactures these figureheads.
Yes, with no empathy and compassion. So how are you supposed to deal with these people on a level of who we are with empathy and compassion?
Well, if you listen to John Lash, you just take him out.
Well, that's it. That's the warrior mindset coming into being. About how do we transcend, and I mean go through and get to the other end. I don't mean just go around or go to the sideways. I mean, how do we go through that and bring them up with us? I mean, we've got to understand that they have this system has shown us technologies, and all we've done is basically look at them. And now we get a chance to play in there because we are understanding the collective technologies of the human of the human potential, and we have to because of the institutionalized way of indoctrination that has been almost put there to take the individual away from their destiny for the collective. So that to me is that production line, is that this mechanical system that we're all basically want to be a part of, that is just so totally not us, but we buy into it. Why do we buy into it?
So is that where we have to start, Trevor and David? Is with the education system? Do we start there with the kids?
Well, I prefer to look at the whole system because I don't think any one part of it functions in isolation. I've put together see that, and I can post it. You
can send it to me and I can post it.
Okay, there are activities there. There's virtually every activity you can imagine, and I've grouped them into things. For example, and I'm talking mainly about what I consider the desirable new system, like the support system, rather than calling it an economic system, a support system which will enable everybody to do in life what they'd love to be doing and be productive in doing that and providing a service and or products to the community. There's a communication system. We're talking about energy systems. We're talking about transport systems, health, well-being systems, environment, education, etc. And they're all interdependent. They all interconnect. So,
and is the technology, the know-how, the infrastructure, are all of these things already in place in order to bring the vision that you've got into the world right here, right now?
Not all of them, no. We have some fundamental pieces of this puzzle, which we can now start to get. And what I am proposing is creating actually a mini working model of a new civilization based on these new principles that we all agree upon, and obviously that discussion needs to be had.
Are you talking about a real physical place?
Yes, absolutely. I've been offered about 20,000 acres by an indigenous race, which is virgin land at the moment, and they, in their heritage, have a story about this. And when I spoke to them a few years ago, after I described to them what I had in mind, they asked me what it took me so long to get there to see them.
Is that here in Australia?
It's not. I prefer not to say where it is at the moment, but
Okay.
it's an English-speaking country, primarily anyway, and they are ready to go when we're ready to go. So that's somewhere we can start. It's about 20,000 acres to start with, and we've got more land once that gets moving. So
And what is stopping you from getting going?
well, it's a matter of getting the people together, getting the resources attracted. It doesn't necessarily have to be money. It can be actually products and other resources. But this is an idea I've had for years. But in order to, before we get there, we need to create centres where we can actually learn how to do this and how to live this new way. I use the analogy of going to the moon. Okay, we didn't just build rocket ships and grab 3 pilots and say, okay, guys, you're on it, jump in there and off you go. They created simulators, they created training centres and etc. So they were so familiar with those rocket ships and all the technology that went with them when they actually went there. So it became second nature to them. And this is what I'm talking about. And I'm thinking of places or something like that. You can see that. I'm trying to centre that. A beautiful environment where you can actually start bringing people together. And initially, in the
that
training,
looks familiar, David. David O'Brien.
does it? That's in northern New South Wales.
But that's you see, this is what's happening. I mean, we have to listen to the elders because the elders have the story, and the elders have the information that the generations underneath them need. And this is the only process that you can go through. You cannot go through. I mean, you have a talk to a young kid of today. This kid will think he knows everything, right? I know because I have a 17-year-old daughter. And you can't tell them anything. They know everything. So there's this inability for them to accept that there's a process that we go through time and through growth and through understanding, that we get to a level where we have that. I mean, this is why men and women between 45 and 50 lose their sight in one day. Right, this is a momentary thing. It's because they give up their local sight, their sight for just what's around them, for a sight of the expansion. Because they have, it's almost like they've been injected with the bigger story, and they have to go from there, and they know that they have to take that step. So there's these metaphors with the human condition that actually extrapolate into the spiritual condition, the condition of knowledge, of gnosis, of these processes that we go through individually that ignite and precipitate another part of our process. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. We're all listening to these young, highfalutin, mavericks who we go, oh wow, they're really cool. Oh, look at them, they're doing it and all that. But they haven't gone through the process because they weren't created to take us into that state. The elders were. And this is what I'm saying is we've had these Western civilization has basically turned the elders into olders and put them away and said blah. But there's this generation, right, post-war generation who have fought to stay there all of their lives, regardless of how old they are, because they know that will heed them to that moment when they will be called for. And it is a call to, and I'm not saying a call to arms, it is a call to offer that, and in offering, how why these are the fundamental questions that we go through every day. Why we're here, what are we doing here? Who are we? And we have a reflection through tribal society that there is a process that happens that creates a very safe and secure, and this is what Trevor's talking about, people need to feel secure. They need to go to an environment first, and they need to deconstruct from that insecurity that they felt in this Western civilization, because that's what will happen. And then there almost needs to be wellness centers to take them through that deconstruction and reconstruct them into a state where they're on an environment. It's almost like sovereignty, right? The whole concept of sovereignty. You have to protect your flock if you're a shepherd. You can't, you have to anticipate where the wolves are coming from. And now the wolves are coming, they're in our home. In the advent of television, and in the Industrial Revolution, man was taken out of the home. The woman was left. The woman and the children were left as prey to the predators, and that's what's happened. And then the children have been indoctrinated through this medium, and now we're realizing as men that we go through our own natural processes, and we get to a certain stage in our life where through experience and through pain and through whatever is our human experience, that we have the vision. And people have got to stop looking at all this technology, because that's the fear culture telling you and trying to wow you about everything. There is a process for this. There is a process for this paradigm shift, and if people don't fundamentally follow this process, they're going to miss out on it. They're creating their own process with their own ego. The ego is creating their process, and the ego does not create no process. It destroys every process that comes into your mind. I
think I know. Well, I'm agreeing with you, but I can see also that we used to venerate, and some cultures still do, certainly not here in the West, but some cultures still do venerate elders and their wisdom. But through media, we now venerate youth. And we have things like, pop stars and acting stars and sports stars that are thrust out there at the age of 13, 14, who know nothing, and they're writing their life stories by the time they're 16. And that's the shift. That's the focus. These are the ones that we're to look to and look up to and venerate. And there's no wisdom there. There's very little experience there. And when you look at
it's an illusion. It's fabrication. It's created to divert us away from our true destiny and our true process.
Because if we were to listen to the elders, we'd learn something.
That's it.
Well, I have a comment about this, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems to me, I totally agree with your assessment, David. And if it is true that in order to facilitate the personal discovery of genuine identity, if that's the key, for people to discover that what they've been told about themselves or the story they tell about themselves is not who they are, that that's not true. If facilitating people to discover their magnificence is the key to bringing about a peaceful, harmonious world, it's also interesting to know that the technology that's needed to make that happen already exists. We know how to do that.
Exactly.
We know how to do that.
Yeah.
And it's a one-on-one, hands-on proposition that requires some pretty special kinds of people who are really capable of maintaining their own integrity in a way that keeps the people they're trying to facilitate unconditionally safe. And that's also rare. But it's possible. We've seen it work. We've seen it happen. We know what the processes are. We know what the dynamics are that can get you from here to there. We've worked in that environment now for nearly 30 years. So, it seems to me that, a consensus is emerging in this conversation that says, if we have the right place, a safe place, and if we are able to deploy a technology, implement a set of processes that temporarily suspend all the rules in a way that give people an opportunity, literally, to get off the merry-go-round and take a new ticket and discover who they truly are in the company of others who have also taken that journey, in a community that operates by consensus and coaching relationships, where exploitation and control and dominance and cruelty are no longer part of the experience because that's not who we are. Then perhaps it's possible to develop a strategy that would tell us how to get there from where we are right now.
And you gentlemen are the conductors, and you give the tickets, because when you give a ticket, is someone else is seeing their potential, and you are allowing them to see their potential through you, because you become the mirrors, because you have come into your potential. And this is the aspect, and this is the process that we need to understand, is that, sorry, go on.
Walking the walk is part of it.
Exactly.
So we're talking about the same thing here, David, Yurth. We talk about a safe haven, somewhere we can operate safely, be protected by the government of the country, by the people, and start bringing things together, because we do have the know-how, we do have the pieces, we do have the technology, the fundamental technology.
We do, indeed. We do indeed have the technology. I'll give you a perfect example that's working.
Yes.
A perfect example that's working. I don't know if you have a chapter of this organization in your country or if you know about it, but in the United States, there is a group called Best Friends. Best Friends was created 30 years ago by a group of about a dozen people. Their mission was to accomplish precisely what we're talking about. And they found property in southern Utah and they bought it, because their objective was to try to do with other people what we've been talking about doing. What they discovered 30 years ago is that people weren't interested. But what they did discover was that they could do that kind of helping with animals. Today, 30 years later, Best Friends is the largest no-kill sanctuary for animals in the world. And the people who live there and the people who work there are some of the most special people on the planet. It's an awesome place. It's very, very special. People dispense kindness to animals in ways that somehow we have not yet learned to do with each other. But there's a critical piece of information available there that I think is a clue for all of us. And that is, caring for animals gives us an opportunity to be authentic in our expression of unconditional love, to be kind and compassionate and giving in a way that is proactive. We're not reacting in that place to anything. We go there, we volunteer, we spend time with animals, we clean their cages and we clean their dishes and we love them and we hold them and we walk them and we talk to them, and we have a great experience of actualizing authentic love. And if that's what you're...
as you inject that intent into one animal, it goes into the collective species. There is no doubt about that. We know that.
So if you're talking about trying to do this with people, if it's time now, 30 years later, to shift gears.
Yeah. Well, we know it's time.
To take all the best intention of all the most gifted people from Sedona and New Zealand and wherever those communities of enlightened people are, and bring them together in a way that allows for a reprogramming of the story we tell about ourselves so we can treat each other differently, then that's a place to begin. Best Friends is a model, and it works. Their budget is $100,000 a day.
Where do I get a ticket?
Just go online and vote, girlfriend.
Now, essentially, that's what I'm talking about. There's so many aspects to it. It would take another 3 hours just to go over the basics, you know. So it's very difficult in a program like this just to even address it. But what I'm talking about is just that, bringing in the people who are already awake, who are already partially there. Let's get together and do just what you say there with the animals, you know, in a different way, of course. But we do have other know-how now. I've recently reconnected to an old friend of mine who has a game, a transformational game, which is called the Wisdom Game, which is phenomenal. Now, this guy researched this back in the early 90s through for probably 7 or 8, 9 years. He went to over 200 schools, went to the universities. He spent a year with the Aboriginals, and universally the results were very, very similar. And that was harmony and peace and cooperation. And people were just playing these games, hell, having fun, and the transformation was amazing. He took one school, which was the third worst school in Western Australia. Their academic levels were right down. They were bullying all over the place, having fights with the teachers, etc., etc. In the space of about 2 or 3 months, playing this game maybe twice a week, the whole school transformed incredibly. They became number 3 top in that space. The kids were so cooperative, they used to help each other with their own homework. And all the bullying stopped. All sorts of things like this. It's all documented on his website, and he's now reviving this. And I believe we can use this in many, many ways, not just with kids. It was done, they started at the University of Western Australia, and all the psychologists and everything with it, because it's so simple and so easy. And everybody just loved playing it. And we play it. We play it maybe once or twice a week here, and bring a few friends in, and it's fantastic. And it is remarkable. So there's one little tool we can bring into these centres where people start to learn how to cooperate. We had a weekend workshop. Let me just describe this because it was quite unexpected. There were 7 of us, plus the facilitator. And we went through these various games. And at the end of the time, in the last couple of hours or so, the facilitator said, look, I want you to break up into 2 groups, and I want you both to work out some way of expressing what you've learned here this weekend. And we did that. And quite separately, we evolved a demonstration, and it was in blindfold, when we blindfolded, and it was quite amazing. The way it worked is we just walked around, first of all, with our backs to each other, and then each one acknowledged the other one, and then turned around and faced the middle and formed this square. And it was just the way it happened. And now the second group came out, and they did exactly the same thing. Now, this told us we'd formed this collective consciousness, because neither one of us actually decided. We talked about a few things, and this just sort of evolved. We just did it. And so did they. And they were absolutely blown away. The second group were absolutely blown away, as we were, when they did it, because it was almost identical. And so it brought about this collective consciousness you see with flocks of birds and things. You know, it was like, wow, this is incredible. We're now in unison. We were now harmonizing. We were still individuals, but we were there in this other consciousness. It was quite amazing. So there's one tool we can bring in, and that's just one of many things. So if that sounds of interest, I suggest you might want to go and have a look at the website. It's called thewisdomclub.com, and it's spelled W-I-Z-Z, or double Z for you, David, W-I-Z-Z-D-O-M, thewisdomclub.com, and go and have a look-see.
I'll provide links to that and everybody's websites in the description.
So, I mean, that is so exciting, because we've now got the tools to create cooperation and harmony. very simply and with a lot of fun. And we can now bring that in and help people. And it raises your consciousness and it connects you or reconnects you with your intuition, your intuitive selves.
So what's the hurdle? If it's been used in at least one school in Western Australia, what's the hurdle in getting this introduced into the curriculum?
The system, really, the educational system doesn't permit it. It was done in a way which was just supplemental to the existing structure. The teachers loved it, of course, because their whole classes started to work together and cooperate, and their grades went up, etc., etc. And yet the system prohibited it, so it just never got used.
What we have to understand is the current system was created in the war room, right? The Tavistock Institute, which moved from England into to America, right, was the war room of the generals and the hierarchy of the wars. The guys who just sat around and smoked cigars and cognac, while all the people on the ground were getting killed, right? And they realized that critical analysis needed to be taken out of the educational curriculum, and they have done that systematically. It's been a systemic infusion into the educational system globally now. There's an echo.
Yeah. Well, we recognise this. I think we all recognise that the existing educational system is defunct in its. Again, we need a system.
I have a question for you now.
Yes.
I mean, let's assume that the game you're talking about really is the harbinger of the kind of change we're all saying that we want. That it, by voluntary participation and cooperation, gives people an opportunity to experience genuine collaboration, and dissipates the likelihood of conflict. So you have some examples of localized success, 2 or 3 years of anecdotal information that strongly suggests that this might be a useful tool. Like any other useful tool or technology, where do you go now? How do you get this into the game generally? What comes next?
Well, the inventor of this game is attempting to get some funds to produce them and get them out there. He sees it as a game which could go into every home on the planet, potentially. And it's the sort of game that becomes infectious, because when people play it, people want to play it. It's a game which any child from maybe 3 or 4 years upwards to the oldest adult can play at the same time. So it's a participatory game where everybody joins in, and there are certain rules which are basically to keep everybody safe. And it's simple and easy to do. But at this stage, I'm thinking about it, using it in our training centres, so that when people come in, they just naturally start to harmonise, and you start to rediscover these abilities that you didn't even realise you had sometimes.
But if we're coming up against the current education system,
yeah,
in terms of getting these into schools, so what do? Do we try and fight the current system? Do we go around the current system by hopefully parents perhaps putting their hand up to participate and taking the game into the school themselves and doing it outside of school hours? Do we try and get or working in conjunction with a teacher who's on board to do it during the lunchtime, so it's not imposing on the curriculum that the school's insisting upon? Do we come up against the system and fight it, or do we go around it?
Well, you can't go around anything. You've got to build your own schools. On this 20,000 acres, you build your schools and the people will come. The people will come with the ability of what they need to do. They will have skills themselves. It'll be a system of helping each other.
But do we want this now, though? We don't.
Well, you can put
You're not
20
walls.
kids around. You don't need walls for a school. You just need outside and someone to teach. You know, and you've got nature teaching them at every moment anyway.
Right.
So but you see, what we have to do is we have to understand. To me, is to get this land on a sovereign basis. Get this land and have sovereign land. So and this whole concept of sovereignty is to me integral at the moment. While this current system, while this current structure is still up and running. It is deconstructing. We know it's deconstructing, but the fact is, you have to have that level of protection. That's an imperative part of bringing in a new system.
It's
right?
already. It's that's one of the reasons it's been chosen. It does have sovereignty.
There you go. You're sorted.
Yeah, it already has all those qualities, but what we don't have is the resources to start to bring it together. Well,
all you do is you call on the people, and they'll bring the resources with them. I guess it's the same thing. If you build it, they will come. They're waiting. Everybody's waiting at the periphery.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of the elders calling them in. I mean, there's no one else that can do that will have the ramifications. So you guys have got to open up and say, okay, the doors are open, all come in. And everyone will come. I guarantee you, you guys have been waiting your whole lives for this. There's no doubt about that. We were all born for this sort of stuff.
Thank you for verifying that. And I totally agree. But before we do that, we've got to come together. The elders, if you like to call them that. I call them the key players. And
exactly.
Because some people. Like Lisa here, I see Lisa as a prime example of one of these key players. She's already got that consciousness. She's already there, so you don't have to be old. If you got it, you got it.
Well, thank you for saying I'm not old.
No, Lisa's a catalyst, a conduit. She brings these key players together and integrates them. It's like the binding mechanism. It's because of this concept of separation that we've had for the past for 1600 to 2000 years. We've been separated. Why have we been separated? To take us each of us away individually from our individual destiny and destination as well. So we can't, once we get on the path of our individual destiny, the path for the collective destiny will show itself. But that is the process. You can't go from stage 1 to stage 6. You've got to go there and wait till it's in total completion. And Lisa, what you were saying, no, I'm going to pass myself, but I won't. So you've Lisa's the catalyst. Lisa will bring all the elders together. Lisa is one of the catalysts. And I'm telling you, in my knowledge, there's some major astronomical events are going to happen in this year, right? And I tell you what, there's going to be mass exodus from the cities. I'm not talking about any Armageddon or apocalyptic event. I'm going to be talking about energy. People are going to awake en masse because there is generations of people like you two gentlemen who have awoken over your lifetimes. But there's going to be that instantaneous awake where people are just going to evacuate the cities and leave them.
They need somewhere to go.
And they need somewhere to go. So these aren't something that needs to be think about. These places that you're doing, Trevor, needed to be put into action now because there's going to be how many people in the cities? There's what 6 million in New York or something, 7 million in New York. You're going to have this collective from every city evacuation, and people need somewhere to be nurtured and to deconstruct from this fear that they have been so afflicted with for the past 50 or 60 years.
So in order to give people who are watching this and hopefully feeling inspired and excited some practical steps, that would be if you own land, if you own some rural land, then go through the process of making that land sovereign. And there is a process,
Yes.
and we can send people to the information on that.
And we can put them in touch with people who know that process.
Exactly. Start thinking about the resources that you would need there. Start connecting with the people in your community who are the elders, who are those who have skills, who have access to resources. Start learning from, is it World Harmony, Trevor?
Yes.
Start learning from the World Harmony website. Perhaps purchase one of these games. Start taking some steps to create that for people. If you're in that position, and if you're not, if you're one of these people in the city who is starting to feel like that's probably me in 6 months' time, that's going to be me, I'm going to be one of those ones heading out,
Yep.
then start looking already. Start seeing how perhaps you could contribute to something that you can go to in the future. Start seeing about resources that you could take to something like that.
And also, Lisa, it's not the elders that are going to call the people. It's the land. The elders are the ones who have the perception of where to put the people, because they know that the land that they put them on will be safe. The energy of the land will also be conducive to feeling safe and going through that initial process of what needs to be done in that deconstruction of fear.
David, do you want to add to that?
Well, my notion about this is that there is an urge that people feel to become whole. All of us really long for wholeness and well-being from the inside out, and we don't know how to get there from here. So, one of the hard questions we ask is whether we're going to be in the rescue business or whether we're going to be in the facilitating business, because you can't do both. My personal belief is that, as David has correctly said, there are those on the planet who came here to participate in facilitating this change of trajectory. And if we're going to work in a collaborative way to help that happen, then at very least, we have to be clear about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it so that we can make sense out of moving, as David says, from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. Sometimes these things take on a trajectory of their own and are not linear, but we have to begin as if they are. And we have to trust the process. We have to trust that we're not alone here, that we're not simply relying on our own wits and notions and concepts, but that, we're being aided by others, some in this world and some in the unseen world, whose mission it is to help this happen. And if we're going to be conduits for that goodwill, they're not going to take our free will away from us. But if we're open and if we're focused and if we're clear, then we can become aware and opportunities and resources can be made available. We just have to get squared away so that when that cubic centimeter of chance presents itself, we're squared away enough so that we can grasp it without hesitating and move it forward. And in practical terms, what that means to me is that in a separate subsequent conversation, we have an opportunity between the four of us and perhaps others who want to join this conversation to begin to create the outline of a plan that will help us to take the very first step. Trevor's taken steps. Lisa and David, you've taken steps. I've been spending the last 40 years taking steps. We're not alone.
No.
Seems to me that now is the time to extend an invitation to conversation.
And we have to realize, I think, gentlemen, that and Lisa, that step
True about
two.
this process.
That step two will.
True about the process is that until you breach that quantum threshold, so that the initiative will become self-supporting, you can push on it as long as you want and die frustrated and tired. So we've got to find a way to hit that tipping point, and being focused and making a zero exit commitment and being in integrity and being open and inviting others who are like-minded to join the conversation seems to me to be the next logical thing to do.
Yes.
And I feel, Lisa, that step two will not show itself until step one is completed. This is the momentum. This is why people need to stay focused on step one rather than jumping ahead. Because as you get to the pinnacle of step one, whatever step that is and whatever process that is, you almost
step two will reveal itself.
Demand step two to reveal itself, but there is that tipping point that David was talking about, and in that tipping point is that formula for step two to come into being. And what we were talking about before, this word meutix, it's a Greek word which means rebirthing. It's you ask the proper, knowledgeable and understanding questions to rebirth something.
Sorry,
something
David Yurth, could you just mute yourself again, please?
Say again?
Can you just mute yourself when you're not speaking? Thank you.
There you go. And this word called meutix, M-A-U-E-T-I-C-S, it's an old Greek word that pertains to midwifery, about, asking intelligible questions and knowledgeable questions that will precipitate the next part of a process. That will, and you're a midwife bringing something into the consciousness, but you're not bringing it from any external dominion. You're bringing it from an internal subconscious soul level dominion, which is connected to the earth. So it's the earth that's going to replenish humanity, and through the connect. And I keep saying this, it is not by chance that we are connected to the earth by the soles of our feet. And I'm not talking about SOLES. I'm talking about SOULS. So we're getting information from this planet, right? But also this last paradigm, this Piscean paradigm, whatever you want to call it, is all about being separated. And we've been separated from the earth, and we've been separated from the gnosis and the knowledge of the earth. And now that knowledge is coming through, and if you're waiting, and if you're meditating, and if you're going into all these spiritual practices, that you're going to try and bring some sort of off-worldly being to come here and to save you, you're going to be waiting till the end of time, because it's and as this famous saying is, we're the ones who we've been waiting for. There is no one else, because we have been primed for this, right? Because no one else has shown up, and no one else will show up.
Totally.
So it's a facade. It's part of the illusion. Let's embed ourselves into the ground instead of becoming. We were talking to Irene Coates. She's an author and part of the Bloomsbury Group, who we're going to get on the radio show, and a personal friend of mine as well. She wrote the book Who's Afraid of Leonard Woolf, and which is the story of society almost priming a culture of men that if any feminine strong powerful being came into existence, these men would go out and destroy it. These are the mechanisms that the predatorial society offers. That if we have had a discrimination against the feminine and masculine balance, And that needs to be redressed immediately, right, within our own consciousness. And in doing so, we connect, and this is what the earth is going to offer us, right? Because we don't call her the mother for nothing.
Well, if we do have a follow-up, and I think we should, because I'm anticipating a conversation emerging out of this within those who watch it. I'd love to be joined by other women.
Yes.
Instead of just me and the boys' club.
Irene was the person who single-handedly had the tunnels stopped for 10 years because of the exhaust systems. And she was an activist back in the 60s and 70s. But I mean, it's the power. We've got to understand we're coming into our own power, and it's not we haven't come into it just to let it go. You haven't had an elder around you just to basically let them die. This is not what we should do. This is what the system does, and this is what the system gives us as reference points. And we've got to stop looking at the reference points from the systems and create our own. Because this is what's going to bring people into their own understanding of what's happening now, is by the reference points that they see and the reference points that they point themselves towards, instead of pointing them. Because as I've always said, you look to fear, that's all you'll get. You look to love, that's what you'll get. But look in the middle and join the both, and the both will assimilate. And as they assimilate, right, the stronger will take over. And I'm not saying the stronger as in the dominant. I'm saying the more important one, the one that we need for that balance and that healing. And we're going to go through an amazing healing time at the moment, because it is going to be precipitated by the planet. And the elders will guide us and are guiding us, and we need to listen to them. And for everybody out there, you are doing a great disservice to yourself and to everybody if you don't listen to what the elders have to say, because what you perceive is going to happen ain't going to happen, because you're not created to perceive and to understand what's going to happen. You've got to go to the people who know what's going to happen, who are putting things in place, who are being proactive, who have wiped the cocoon of bullshit away from it all because of their experience.
David, we're about to lose David Yurth. David, okay. Can I ask you if there's anything you want to leave people with before you go? Closing comments?
I can unmute myself here. Yeah, I'm just very pleased to participate in the conversation. Looking forward to subsequent sessions with you and perhaps others in a bigger venue. The technologies we have access to that make this possible are just really awesome to me, and I'm really happy to be involved in this process with you. I'd like to be able during the coming days to have some Skype time with each of you individually, so we can begin to talk about putting a how-to plan of action together, see if we can create a consensus, and then have this conversation again, and then perhaps invite some others to join us.
That would be lovely.
But thank you very much for your time and for the opportunity, and God bless you. Let's see if we can make something happen.
You too, and it was great talking to you again.
Thanks, David.
Bye-bye, Trev.
Bye.
Trevor, is there anything you want to say in closing?
Well, I the same that David just did, is that we have discussions around this. My thoughts at the moment are about first getting our act together, so the people who are interested in being proactive and doing something about this and working together come together. Now, we can do this on Skype or we can do it physically. I have been offered a venue in New Zealand, a 5-star venue at the Eagle's Nest. I don't know if you know the place in the Bay Islands, free of charge for a 2-week get-together on fees. I call them key players. that would be the ideal situation as far as I'm concerned, because that would give us all chance to really go into depth of who and what we are, both, all, and express what we have to offer, what we want to put on the table, as it were.
It would also give us an opportunity to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and for 2 weeks and try and live this new paradigm.
Well, yes. One of the things I'm looking to attract now is, once we start this, is one or more donors, people who are interested in this planet and seeing the well-being of this planet go forward, who have the wherewithal and would love to see that wherewithal put to good use, and we can do that. And I think that is so important right now. Rather, I'm against trying to get investors, per se, people who want to put money in and get profits back. I'd much prefer donors who have the heart in the right place and who will offer their support for us to do this. And I'm sure once the ball gets rolling, then there'll be others who will come online as well to do the same thing. So that's my thoughts at the moment. What do you think, David? Is that workable to you?
Well, Trevor, only you can say that the ball is rolling because it starts from you guys.
Yeah.
You know, and once it starts from you guys, the momentum goes down into the previous generations. That's the way it works. It cannot work any other way. It works from the experience, from the knowledge that you've gained over your lifetime, and you go into that that evolution that we go into, you know, as we grow. And there is a natural evolution. There is a natural process of this planet, and you know, within the human species, and people are answering that call, and with that call, you know, the precipitation of the process comes into their line of vision, and it says it starts from you guys, and as I said, you know, you guys have got to put out the call, and the call will be healed because it has to. And you know yourself with universal understanding and with the understanding that we've accumulated, you know, over the years, that when you and it's not even a demand, you know, when you offer something with pure intent into the universe and into the planet, then the planet and the universe has to comply. There is no option. Because all you're doing is basically igniting something, igniting a spark, which has, and this is what I said before. There's a lot of things which haven't been claimed, and we need to claim ourselves, because this system is claiming something, right, and using it against us. And now we're starting to as a collective imagination, collective consciousness, we're starting to get a gist of what that is. And this comes into this global trust that was around, and anyway into it's going somewhere. But the elders have to have that vision and give it life. And as they give it life, the subsequent generations from underneath them will play their part.
They'll hear the call to action.
Elders, or is that what you're referring to, or are you talking about elders as in Indigenous people?
Well, elders as in you, elders as in because we've been separated, we've been in this paradigm of separation. All the elders have been separated, and now all the elders are coming back together. Why? Because it's time. Right. Exactly. So, and this is, and we know, you know, with a lot of, you know, great philosophers and great writers and great minds that are saying now more than ever, tribal cultures, indigenous cultures need, everybody needs each other.
Well, one concept I have, probably not the right word, understanding is that I believe, and I have had demonstrations of this, that we are now heading in this new paradigm which is going to be in a positive direction. I had an experience where I appeared to contact our collective consciousness some years ago, and the message I got was, round about the late 1970s, early 1980s, there was a decision made collectively in our collective higher selves, as it were,
Yes.
where we decided not to go through another negative cycle like at Lemuria and Atlantis and destroy ourselves again. And we chose now to move into a positive direction, and we had this 40 to 50 year window in which to do that. And at that time, we were on the brink of atomic war. You probably don't remember, Lisa, but you may, David.
No, I do actually. It was because I was in high school, and I remember my whole generation feeling that, you know, Reagan was going to roll over and hit the wrong button one morning, and that would be the end of us. That was kind of the running joke.
It was a very real possibility at that stage, but that dissolved after that period. Suddenly, it wasn't there anymore, and we've learned since that there's been stories of extraterrestrials deactivating nuclear missiles. We've all heard about. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But to me, that possibility has now gone, way gone. And we are now moving in this direction. And I believe this year, 2012, is probably going to be the turning point where there's no return. We're now on that timeline, as Bill talked about in that interview. And so for me, it gives me a very warm feeling knowing that and trusting that we cannot be stopped now.
No.
It's inevitable. We've predestined that we now are going to go in a positive way. And all we can do is act it out and do it. And if we just trust that and go ahead, then it'll just fall into place.
You know, I think I wasn't alone. I experienced this, but I know I wasn't alone. A lot of people individually felt themselves, shift from a negative to a positive timeline at around August, September last year. Mm-hmm. So even though it may have been done on a collective level 30, 40 years ago, individually, a whole chunk of us felt that shift at the end of last year.
Well, this is how it works, Lisa. You know, I mean, when the elders get together on a collective level, and I'm talking about not just a tribe of elders, I'm talking about a global
generation
eldership.
of elders.
No, a global eldership, right? Which they need to connect like we need to connect, right? And it's a hierarchical thing, and it's not an oppressive hierarchical thing. It's just the nature of things. It's just the process that we have to go through, and we have to understand that within a tribal culture, the elders keep the tribe safe, and the elders, dissipate any anomalies that infiltrate the tribe that don't really need to be there or that are a part of the illusion. It's one of the perfect movies is about Apocalypto, Mel Gibson's movie, about when the jaguar paw saw the first fleeing of the tribes, right? And he had fear, and his father didn't want him to bring fear into the tribe because it didn't belong there, and it doesn't belong. It doesn't belong in our consciousness. When something is infiltrated enough into the collective consciousness, it will become a reality because that's how the imagination works. We create our own life. This is how we create it, through our imagination. Right? And a collective imagination working creates this reality. And the wars that you see is the continuum, right, of this fear culture, injecting and validating. It's the validation. And now the elders need validation, and they have to be validated in order for the generations underneath them to validate themselves. And we have, and that's what needs to be done. And if we try to precipitate any part of the process which is far ahead, then we'll be doing ourselves a great disservice. It's got to be by process, by stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. And it's that continuum, as I said before, and it's really important that people put this into their lives. As you totally take responsibility of the process and you allow that process to take shape, the next stage will show itself at the end of the process, not in the middle of it or in the front of it. That's how it works. And we have to stop giving ourselves the illusion that we're all right. These young generation and the generations after, you can't tell them anything. They think they're right. It's because is that a protective mechanism on a collective level of generations protecting themselves from the fear culture? Is it? It could be. Shut the door. And we know within extinction, the concept of extinction within animals, and I don't mean to ramble on, but there is a trigger in the collective in each collective species that if they are getting to extinction, they will just vanish. But they will vanish interdimensionally because that's the trigger that's been put into them, and that's going into another room. Anyway, it's all good. That's our generation. It's all good.
Good question. Could I ask you, what's your take on this discussion we've had today?
Sorry, were you asking me or David?
Yes, you listen.
I think it's been really productive. I think we've seeded ideas, and that people can actually see, could honestly look at this and start to see a way out, practical steps to take, and also the whole concept of just taking back their power and validating what they're feeling, because I know they're all feeling it. They're feeling this change, they're feeling this shift, they're feeling the confusion that goes with it, and they're perhaps feeling lost as well about what to do about it. I think if expressed, if taken on board the right way, it could be an invigorating, activating step that we've got the conversation started, and that's all. Essentially, that's all we've done, and we've played with some ideas. But continuing this conversation, I think, is very important, and bringing in some different perspectives as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to thank you both, and David, of course, has already left us, but for participating in this today, and I hope you're both prepared to come back and keep this conversation going.
Yes, I'd love to, and I would like to offer an opportunity to talk with the founder, the inventor of this wisdom game, to maybe interview him, because he's got some amazing stories to tell.
Yeah, no, I am interested.
Yeah, and
we need to hear the stories.
Yes, yes, and they are amazing, and he's learning so much himself every day as he plays it, and so do we. We've had my partner a remarkable experience. One of her biggest fears in her workplace just disappeared. Now she's at the top in her group now, whereas before she was always struggling. And we put it down to this game. Hell, it was so simple, and it happened so quickly. So we're excited about that. I mean, it's another aspect of what we do.
Well, it's a collective imagination demanding new technologies come in to lift the human consciousness. It's those underpinning. It's that underpinning that we do to bring our consciousness up. There has to be and we're here also to document and log this process. So future generations will learn from this. This is and because of the technology that we have through Skype and through different other mediums, we are logging it. We are logging the process, and the process needs to be adhered to because it is a discipline, and it is a discipline that's been eradicated from the human collective imagination for the past 2,000 years, but is coming back in because we are demanding it come back in, because we have the experience of the human collective consciousness has experienced all the pain it needs to experience, and therefore it is demanding that the elders come out of seclusion. It is demanding that subsequent generations come out of seclusion regardless of their fear.
Yeah.
And
it is the timing.
and play. Yep.
Well, thank you very much again, and I look forward to part two.